Welcome to our new episode of Impact Design. I'm very pleased to have an interview today with Kathryn Larsen and her amazing research done on sustainable materials, experimenting, among others, with seaweed. So we will find out all about this. Very welcome to
Thank you.
Impact Design, and I'll let you introduce yourself a bit, what you've been doing and a bit about your background, please.
Okay. So my name is Kathryn. I am originally from New Jersey in the United States, and I have a little bit of a mixed background. Before I started architecture school, I decided to go to Japan, and I really fell in love with the traditional architecture there. So that really influenced me from a young age. I went back to start architecture school in the States. I ended up transferring out after a year and then studying architectural technology in Denmark. And now I'm back to studying architecture for my master's degree in the Netherlands. It was first in Denmark that I came into contact with a material called eelgrass and the history of building roofs with it. So I found that really fascinating, and I ended up doing a lot of research in this area.
So thank you very much. Yeah, I find the material also very intriguing. And maybe you tell us a bit more about the use of the material, and if you can show us some samples and what are the benefits of it.
Oh, okay. So eelgrass is a material actually we've used around the world. It's a type of seagrass, but our ancestors knew it colloquially as a seaweed. And it would wash up in large amounts, and people found in the United States, for example, that they could use it as insulation. And in Denmark, they found that after they ran out of materials on the island of Læsø, that they could use this to thatch their roofs. So they came up with this technique of thatching these roofs that ended up being almost a meter thick and a very distinct style. And it's really fascinating because the thatching process on that island actually evolved, because at a certain point it became women's work to thatch these roofs. And they had like a material knowledge of spinning wool. So they treated the eelgrass as if they were spinning wool to build these ropes that they would then thatch through the rafters. So some of the benefits of this are, if you're using it as an insulation material, it's actually as insulative as modern mineral wool. But you can also use it to stuff mattresses or pillows. And these are all things we used to do in the past. And we've kind of forgotten all these uses of the material.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of different usages that you can have it for. What about some other materials? Because I know you also experimented with kombu leather. What is kombu leather and acoustic eelgrass?
Yeah, so after actually I began experimenting with trying to build with eelgrass, and I came up with trying to like downsize the thatching process. So this is like my current prototype, which is actually a acoustic panel that I've made through thatching and weaving the eelgrass into like a structural panel, and you could hang this on your wall. And then I was so interested with working with the eelgrass, I tried dyeing it. This is a little hard to see on the screen, but this is a little sample that I dyed with like natural dyes and stuff. Additionally, because of that, I started getting really interested in kelp and seaweed in general, and thinking, okay, how could we actually apply this to architecture? And one of the big influences, I have to say, would probably be Julia Lohmann's work with the Department of Seaweed. And I really liked how she was using that material. So in my studio, I came up with a way that you could leatherize it. So this is actually just a kelp frond that has been leatherized, and it's completely dry, but it's also completely flexible. Mm-hmm. So I think that this could be a really good material for either a membrane for like a sliding screen in a building, or because it's semi-translucent, it's a little hard to see because it's so dark. For lamps, I've experimented with using it, and I think also as a leather substitute in some cases, because it is quite strong, this particular species. So it kind of went off in a really weird direction, but I'm following kind of where the path goes and experimenting along the way.
Yes, but it's really useful to know that you could use it as alternative leather, where there's a few materials now actually on the market, like apple leather and rhubarb leather.
Yeah.
We experimented with. But is this going to be available on the market? I mean, how are you going to go ahead of, with it?
I had a couple of people that were really interested, but then one of the problems is that it's too artistic to commercialize at this point, because individual like kelp fronds that I've leatherized. So then you have a limitation on the size that you can get because it's up to the size of the kelp piece that the leather is produced from. So that's not really appealing for the mass market. So you'd have to rethink it a little bit. Maybe a seaweed-based bioplastic would be more appealing as a leather alternative.
But what about the other material? What about the seaweed thatch? What about the other materials? Is this
so that's actually commercially available. There's going to be a commercially available product for an acoustic mat available in Denmark, designed by Seawool Company, and they've actually created these mats out of it that are like spongy mats that you can actually stick up on the ceiling or on the walls. And it's not thatched; it's just ground up and then blended with a binder so that you get a nice panel. So unfortunately, one of the things I keep running into with my applications is that people think they're a little too artistic to scale up at the moment. But I do have some ideas up my sleeve, but it is a more, I would say, an artistic application at this point than a widespread commercial.
It depends on when the demand goes up, probably things will change. It's always between, the demand that is created something.
I'm open-minded, and I definitely don't want to compromise on the way I treat the material, because to me that whole process of working with it is very important.
What made you to be so interested in sustainable materials?
It came through my interest in traditional building. Like I said, when I was in Japan, I was surrounded by people building with wood and engineering Japanese joinery still, but using CNC mills to cut it. And I just thought, wow, we can still build with like these traditional methods that we've developed, but we can kind of hack into it with our production knowledge, and we can upscale it and we can make it smarter. So when I actually took my sustainability course in the States, they were focused on earth building and all these indigenous methods of building from Africa. So I kind of just in my head just started turning more towards these vernacular techniques as a way to find sustainable materials and also methods for working with them.
And is there anything else that you're working on that you haven't disclosed yet, that's not on your website, that's coming up as another intriguing material?
Yes, so Delft actually has a biomaterial recipe for a ground muscle aggregate that is very similar to a concrete. It's not as structurally sound as a concrete when you scale it up, but for smaller scale stuff, it is apparently structurally similar. And it is completely dissolvable in water. So it's something that is also very sustainable, and you're using the shells from mussels that normally just get thrown out. So I've started on a few initial tests, seeing if I can play with that recipe I asked for permission first before, riffing on it. But my first attempt was a complete failure. But that's how it is when you're like experimenting with this stuff in your kitchen and like cooking it up, and it's like ratios everywhere. I've got a little lab notebook, and it's just kind of crazy. My first one, I didn't put enough binder, so it just cracked and broke in a million pieces, but it'll get there.
How do you think the generation of designers is different and being much more concerned about sustainable design than in the past? Do you feel that it's in general, it's not just you?
It's totally not just me. This is a broader trend, I would say. I think everyone in my age group category is realizing that after COVID, we're going to have to deal with climate change pretty heavily. And we all are pretty scared, and we all just want to do something about it. So it just seeps into our work, because we're realizing, hey, we might exist in a future where we don't get to like pick these materials that we're so used to picking all the time. Like, we have to look for alternatives now, like, so that when we run out of raw sand or raw this or raw that, and we can't ship it in by the boatload because of all these taxes or carbon taxes, we have to start looking at the alternatives now and playing with that now before they're maybe even accepted, I would say.
Okay, that leads me to my last question. What is the impact you like to have on design and architecture? I mean, you are the next generation, and what is it what you would like to see?
I would actually, in addition, to having, this more sustainable connection with architecture, I would like the general public to get more educated about architecture and design and understand what is in their buildings and have more of a say in it. I think being able to go behind the scenes and seeing just all the things that go into making a building, I do think that the general public to some extent should have an understanding of that, and also maybe about the general urban planning developments that go on, why things get built, why things don't get built, why our cities look the way they do. And I think we need to create more content that's consumable for average people instead of just for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially, as you said, there's a lot of materials still in use today in construction, which are actually quite harmful for human beings. But because we don't see them, we tend to be only scared when it's very tangible and very apparent. But I think there's a lot of substitutes today, that you can use even in building construction, in insulation, in acoustics, that could be as good or even better than the traditional way of building, but less harmful. And it's good to bring it up to the surface and have much more choice. And then,
exactly.
A lot of the future designers and architects will be able to, to use it and make the awareness of that there is definitely something without compromising the process of building, but not letting our resources, be coming to an end and then be there without any new ideas. So thank you very much. I think that was giving a bit of a sneak view into what you have been doing. I think, I hope there's many others like you to do research, which is fantastic, to find some new materials. And I'm sure it will get more into the markets once the demand is there. And, you can always start with some small projects, but yeah, thank you so much for, sharing your research work, your ideas in design and on innovative materials. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.